bring out the real pertinent issues that are matters which again can feed into the nexus of both private sector development as well as climate change. So those are the two prominent things that we do. Along with that, we take up some projects where we implement, bring in private investments. For example, we are currently identifying some projects which are climate resilient infrastructure as well as value chain projects across the county. Identify these projects across the counties, and now we are bringing in private investors to come in and do the investments into these climate resilient projects and take the development to a whole different world in terms of ensuring the sustainable development of these projects. And in terms of progress, yes, we cannot be satisfied with what we have made, but I must tell you that, from where we started and where we are going, obviously the trend is going slightly upwards. It could go rapidly, but it is definitely going towards the right direction.
So I like that you talked about research. Who is the consumer of the research you've done?
Brilliant question. This is one of the problems that we have in this country. There are a whole lot of documents.
We don't read.
There's a whole lot of documents that are available, but unfortunately they're sitting nicely in the shelves. These days they're sitting nicely in the digital world somewhere. But I guess we are coming up with a solution where we are trying to break it down into small pieces, consumable by the mama in the village, for example, be it by a GIFs or be it by a small Twitter series of tweets on a particular report, or some animations, or some videos, or some audios, or some podcasts. So we are trying to do that, and the real consumers of these would be those innovators out there who has these ideas, but have some problems in terms of access to information. So those would be the real consumers of this research.
Yeah. Have you benefited from Evelyn's support UNDP? Did you review any of their material as you worked on yours? Have you come across it at the county level?
Not just we have reviewed the report, we have also worked on UNDP projects together, especially on the commercial forestry side of things. So yes, the information, who wants to go look for it, the information is already available, but the problem is there is so much of information that is available on the web these days that we are fatigued by it. Right? So I think it is some amount of filter that needs to happen, and some amount of dissemination strategy and a knowledge management strategy that we need to have to ensure it reaches the right consumer in the right format.
And have your innovators benefited from the treasury?
Yes and no. The reason I would say yes is they know there is a treasury. They know that there are big programs out there. But the reason I would say no is there are other programs which have gone real fast and approached the private sector. The benefits are very clearly articulated. So I think the innovators are kind of motivated to go and approach these competitions, these calls, so that they get direct access, not just the access to finance, not just the funding support, but also the business mentorship kind of support that they get, the incubation support, the acceleration support that they get, which proves to be very beneficial for them. And along with that, all these calls, all these challenges will also have a component of raising finances to ensure that the innovation is scalable.
So we still need to do more. So now to Dr. Walter, as you've heard from your fellow panelists and what they're saying, so if you could highlight to me your 3 key achievements. I know you've said about this and that. If we live here today, what 3 things should we remember were your key achievements and the contribution you've made or the progress?
First and foremost, probably I will talk about the policy that's almost complete. It's called the Green Fiscal Incentives Policy. We've worked on that policy with technical people from KEPSA, and so we've taken account of the ideas from the private sector. So that policy is going to help us leverage on private sector financing, because that's a very big issue with regards to climate action. There was a report that was released in 2018 by the Climate Policy Initiative, and it showed that although there is so much resources from the private sector, they seldom engage in climate action because they need business cases. And thank God for today, because there was the strategy was released, and there was also something on business cases. Number two is, as the National Treasury, we are trying to mainstream tracking and coding at the sector level. You see, if you look at the infrastructure of the Green Climate Fund, you realize that developing countries need to be transparent on the support they receive in terms of financing. So the developed world comes up with the funds, but for the developing, the responsibility we have as the developing countries is to have an elaborate tracking and coding framework that ensures climate action is reported. So we have a segment 8 that is going to be included in the budget, and that segment is on climate action. So any money that goes into climate action, mitigation or adaptation oriented is going to be reported, and it's going to also be replicated at the county level. So once we have our expenses and our deliberate efforts towards climate action through available data that will be provided by the tracking and coding mechanism, then I think we'll be able to mobilize more. So those are the key ones that I will say. And most of the things they've mentioned, I've taken note of them, and of course I will cascade that to the management.
Will the investments be tax-free? Are you negotiating with KRA? Because what would motivate me to put money in adaptation when I'll still pay tax on the money and other things? So those are the things I was hoping you'll say is in that law.
So the policy is very comprehensive, and besides incentivizing the private sector to engage in climate action that is mitigation and adaptation oriented, it also provides incentives for the private sector that want to go clean.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are definitely incentives, and also there are disincentives for those who decide to go against the will of the spirit of the policy.
I must say I'm very happy. The Treasury has come from far. So from the time I worked in NEMA in, I think 2003 and 4, we're chasing these things and green investments incentives. I'm happy we are here now. Globally, there's been a discussion that on the continent, we have enough money. We can mobilize enough money. We don't need to be the continent that is begging. Of course, we want climate justice. Yeah, you polluted, you pay. But from where you sit, even within Kenya, do you see we can mobilize enough funds with your policy?
I don't want to promise that, but there seems to be we are looking forward to a positive scenario, a better scenario than what we have right now. But before we can, of course, the developing countries emit an insignificant amount of greenhouse gases to the
3%.
Yeah, and what we are basically trying to incline ourselves towards is the adaptation aspect, because we need to build our resilience. And so, even as much as we can mobilize locally, finances locally, we really need the support of these developing nations, because they're the ones who polluted, and they're the industrial nations that have contributed to that. So what I can say is that the future is promising with regards to mobilizing local finance, but we still need them to also support actions, not to be dependent and sort of slavery in quotes, but they need to also pay for what they've done.
Thank you. Dr. Wandaka, what are your key achievements from the sector board? What is the sector board's key achievements?
Thank you, Karen. From the previous speakers, in the past, private sector was not very much involved in terms of climate change actions. So yet, we also bear the brunt of the climate change actions in our business operations. So what first and foremost, there was the need for climate-friendly legislation and policies and strategies. So we've really made an input into that in the formulation of those by working closely with the government and other partners so that we can have climate-friendly legislation, policies, and strategies. The other key issue I'm very proud of is why we are here today, ladies and gentlemen. We have developed some structures, some strategies that we have done today through a very consultative, multi-sectoral enhancement program, so that now we have a document that can guide us in the implementation of CC actions for the private sector and how we are going to partner with our development partners as well as the public. The third issue that I can talk about is, again, something that we have celebrated today, the formation of the platform that we are calling Climate Business Information Network. To me, that's a major milestone because now we have a platform, a one-stop shop, whereby we can be able to engage with the development partners, with the public sector in terms of climate change. Not forgetting the fact that we have also actually contributed to the mitigation and the 10 billion campaign with some commitment worth over 6 billion Kenyan shillings. With this, Madam Karen, I feel these are some of the achievements, then feel me to enumerate all of them.
Thank you. I also strongly feel that this year, the private sector is more well coordinated. When we went for COP26, it was chaotic. So I'm hoping as we move into COP28, why are you laughing? I say the truth. It was chaotic. Private sector didn't have something. So well done, Dr. John, for the effort. So when we come to, and I want to change gears a bit because of time, if you could tell us what lessons you have learned and recommendations as we go forward, standing from Fawo's point, what can we do differently?
Thank you very much. I think one thing we could enhance is the country ownership and country leadership. The country needs to be on the driving seat, and then the partners and the stakeholders, including the private sector, rally around that so that we are all running around a common agenda. Then we need also to enhance the inclusivity, like I mentioned earlier, in policy prioritization, policy decision making, the investment decisions. We need to enhance the multi-stakeholder platforms that allow for participation by the private sector, by the NGOs, together with the government, so that we are all moving together as one. Then I think also the use of data and evidence, that is key, because we need to make evidence-based decisions, and that is why I'm so happy about the platform that you are talking about as the implementation tool for the private sector strategy. So the use of evidence, the sharing of data and knowledge, and really investing in research so that we are using scientific evidence that can be validated and that helps to make decisions that really result in impact. The other thing I think is also the need to disaggregate the data, because you find in terms of the impact of climate change, the impact on men may not be the same as the impact on women, the impact on youth. So it is important that that data is disaggregated so that the interventions are also better targeted. Yeah.
You said something that has got me thinking. Who is the country leadership? And you said country ownership.
Yes.
You want all the 50 million of us to come together and own this?
Not, of course not. I mean, when I say the country leadership, that is the government. Of course, I'm happy to see the treasury here because the treasury is key in terms of ensuring that the resources are availed for investment in the various priority areas. So the government needs to be in the driving seat. Yes.
So, Faith, this is the recommendation to you to take to the government. We need them to be in the driving seat of this agenda. And if they're serious, you know the discussion we had at the corner. So we are hoping for better COP28 engagements. Because 27, we're already counting it as behind us. It is what it is. Thank you so much. And now to you, Evelyn. What lessons can you share with us and recommendations as we seek to accelerate partnerships for climate action?
Thanks. Before I talk about the lessons learned, let me just pick on what the National Treasury has spoken about budget tracking and coding. And UNDP, I would say we want to celebrate that because this is a conversation that we began in 2015 and worked with Treasury to actually look at how we can track climate change budget and coding. And really, for me, a good thing to hear that there is policy coming and that is going to be put to be a part of it. So for me, that's already an achievement that I want to celebrate. And also just to note that for this forum today also is a key milestone because in 2017, UNDP did play a convening role to bring private sector and government together to develop a coordination framework. And we have seen this progress to where we are today. And that takes me to one of the key lessons that we have learned, that it's going to take the whole of us as a society and as a government to address climate change. So really we need to move to a coordinated space. There has been a lot of silo initiatives, and with that we can tap into synergies. With that we are spending so much resources because of a lot of duplication work. So one of the key lessons for us has been the approach needs to be multi-sectoral and it needs to be multi-stakeholder. The second lesson really is around climate finance. There is a lot of investment that we need to make as a country in climate change adaptation as well as mitigation. There has been a lot more in mitigation. We need to really up our game in adaptation. And there's lots of climate finance out there that we need to tap into as a country. And our challenge to all of us today is let us do what we need to do, develop those bankable projects for us to be able to tap into the climate finance, because a lot needs to be done on the ground and it's going to need huge resources.
Every time I hear there's lots of climate finance out there, I cringe. Where? Is there a blueprint? Is there a document I can pick and say, aha, African Development Bank, there's money, without the money costing me? Because I want that money. Evelyn, how do I get this money without suffering?
No, it's going to take work. It's going to take work. And that is why forums like this become very important, our networking, because all of us have information, have leads on what resources are available, on who are the partners that we need to tap into. So a lot more networking so that we can really get to be able to access those resources. COP27 are some of those forums that would be an opener in terms of the global financing that is out there. But we have the environmental fund financing, we have GCF, we have JEF. These are already products, these are already facilities that are available. But how much of that are we accessing as a country?
That's where my worry is. The funds are there, we are not accessing. What do we need to do? I think it's time to move from talking and saying, let us do this to get these funds. Are you accessing the funds? Are you helping us access these funds from your consulting side? And then as you answer that question, what lessons can you share with us and recommendations as we seek to accelerate innovation for climate action?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a brilliant dichotomy at play here. People who have funds are looking for bankable and investable projects, and people who have fantastic ideas are looking for green finances. And the bridge seems to be no way connecting with each other. So that's a real problem, and that's where a colleague from FOA has said the research and all those things that are needed. But more importantly, I think the breakdown of it, I mean, the way you put it, AFDB, this is the money we have and this is how you access it. How do I put that master document together, which will help people who have these ideas? People are really looking to invest in those projects. The money is there, but we don't know where the tap is, right?
Yes.
We don't know how to open the tap. And we at consulting side, very happy to inform you all that we have put together a money of $70 million so far of green finances that we have mobilized, and we put that $70 million to good use in investing in these innovations. And these innovations are scaling up, and they are able to create jobs, and they have so far created around 18,000 full-time equivalent sustainable jobs, green jobs. And all these jobs are sustainable not from longevity point of view, sustainable more from the climate change point of view. So we are happy, but there is so much to be done still. For every competition that we run, we get around 20,000 applications. And we are only able to support 200 of them, 200 best of them. And there are 19,800 applications which goes to the next round. We are unable to support them because of A, the capacity, B, the lack of funding. And this is where we also make appeals to a lot of donor community out there to kind of support us to ensure the innovations out there just don't die without actually making an effort to succeed. So that's one of the biggest takeaway. The second takeaway is we all know the 3 Ps. Let me add, with the permission of the original author of the 3 Ps, let me add the 4th P, which is private sector. I think there is a lot that needs to be done from the private sector, from Paris, where we originally started involving the private sector, to now we have come a long way. But in Kenya, with the kind of robust private sector that we have, there is a whole lot of things that the private sector can take initiative on their own. The other day, you guys have launched the sustainability report. Very happy to be part of that event. Now, Safaricom here has ideas, has capacities, and they know what exactly needs to be done in terms of sustainability. Now, why are we not learning within the private sector community? Why not Safaricom help the other companies to scale up as well, to ensure that they are becoming sustainable as well, and vice versa, of course. So that's one of the second key takeaway, that there has to be cross-learning between the private sectors, and CBIN here is a fantastic platform. It has been conceived with an idea of helping the private sectors become more sustainable. And if CBIN takes up the 10-point charter, which we drafted this time around last year, if we are able to implement that with the support of Safaricoms, the Airtels, the EABLs and of the world, then the entire Kenyan private sector, which has been accused of CO2 emissions, will become net zero very sooner rather than later.
Challenge accepted, but we've been supporting, now removing my KEPSA hat, we've been supporting the businesses that have come to us. I don't want to name them here, but the people have grown bigger than me. Starting with our neighbor, the lady who was there, we've supported her in the sustainability journey. And the other day she called me to say, adios, I'm going to global, which I was very happy. But yes, we are. But even us as Safaricom, we are wondering, how do we tap the money? Once we can show people we've gotten the money, then everyone will believe that the money does exist, because we're a good indicator of this. So I'm going to give everyone, if anyone has a burning issue to say before I summarize our session. Anyone with any final points you might have forgotten? Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, commitment to climate action is paramount. We have been talking. I personally am tired of the talk. If anybody invites me to any more talk without action, I will commit suicide. I'm joking. But it is time we started action. And I'm happy with this COP, because this COP we are not going to commit anything. Yeah? We're just checking in and seeing where we are at. And we need to always stop and reflect and ask ourselves, are we doing justice? Are we doing honor to the future generations? The planet has been lent to us by the next generations. What will they say about you when you are out of this place? So for me, I'd like to say that, and I'm echoing this was said yesterday, if we want to go fast, then everyone go on your own. So FAO, UNDP, KCL, KEPSA, Treasury, run on your own. You will go very fast. But since we want to go far, we all have to come together so that we can go far. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing your insights. We thank the audience. Thank you for engaging and listening to us. I wish I could give you a chance to ask questions, but fate is giving me a bad eye. And indeed, action and multi-stakeholder partnerships are key to accelerating climate action. And we need to hold each other accountable. Without accountability, the Treasury will continue doing these policies and keeping them in the shelves. You will continue doing your research and nobody is reading them. FAO will continue trying to end hunger by 2030. UNDP will continue bringing all of us together and galvanizing us and not making progress. So we need to hold each other accountable in this journey as we move forward. So thank you for your attention and I hope you enjoyed our session. Asanteni.
You may remain for a second. You may remain for a second. Just a second. Thank you. A round of applause to Karen and the team. We have a minute for a question at most two from the plenary. Just a question or two.
Thank you.
We have one there, another one, and another one here. Thank you. And there's a lady and a gentleman. So let's take two.
And say who you're sending the questions to. Remember me, I'm the moderator. This is the panel.
So I will allow you because the pattern is from the chair, and you know the chairperson can fire you in time. So I'll take the one from I don't know whether you have an extra mic.
You can take it.
Yeah. It starts from the lady.
You can hold the mic, the panel.
Good morning. My name is Adita Karenza from SGS. Yeah, I have two quick questions. One, what is the place of green building in the strategy that we've talked about? And when answering, anyone can answer, keep in mind that I think the last I checked, the current regulations are still archaic. That means we cannot be able to take advantage of the newer technologies that are more efficient. So how are we mapping that gap with our climate smart solutions going forward? And the next one is to the Treasury. How do I get to the money as a private citizen who wants to work smart or save my house? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we take all the questions.
Yeah, it's easier that way.
Honestly, mine was just a comment. So fantastic moderation, Karen. I didn't know we have such talented people in the environment sector. Good. But it's, I think what the panel talked about really resonated with me, and especially the bridge that is missing. You know, those that have the funding and those that are looking for the funding. And I feel like using this meeting to say that we somehow fill that gap. And I don't know who can volunteer here to lead us on that journey because we're not experts. But I feel like it's something we should take, we should action immediately. Just a comment.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the very good moderating and panel discussion. My question is to the Treasury, the National Treasury. My name is Abdi Shakur. Have you explored opportunities that are available in the bond market? If you can launch a green bond, you know, by partnering with the Capital Markets Authority, the Nairobi Stock Exchange, Kenya has a big opportunity for raising funds within the country. So that is an area where, you know, the National Treasury can facilitate public investment for green investment.
Back to you, Karen.
Right.
So the answers.
So the National Treasury, I think you're the point of interest. Money.
So I'll start with the first question on how to access the money. I know there were three questions, right? There was one on built environment, and that's related to the strategy. So I'll not, because there are three questions, and two of them are to the Treasury. The other one on built environment probably can be addressed by that. So with regards to accessing the money, the financing by the private sector, we have, let me speak about three financing mechanisms under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that probably I could provide advice on how to access. We have the Green Climate Fund. Then we have the Global Environment Facility. And then we also have the Adaptation Fund. So those are financing mechanisms under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So the Green Climate Fund The National Treasury is the NDA, the National Designated Authority. I know that's probably jargon to most private sector players, but we are the National Designated Authority for that fund in Kenya. And what we do is we receive proposals from private entities, and these private entities can come from the organization that you represent. We review the proposals and ensure that they ascribe to some required investment criteria. And one of them is country ownership. Like it has to address the issues the country is facing with regards to climate change. We also look at the paradigm shift potential. So these are criteria that's provided. So instead of me going deep into that, the advice I will give you with regards to the Green Climate Fund is they have a website. Green Climate Fund. They provide a template on how to come up with a proposal or a concept note. And then they also take you through they have sections which you have to fill. And it will not be very hard for you to fill because the policies are there. How does it address the issues we have related with climate change in Kenya? How are you going to finance it? What's the financing instrument that you need? Is it grants? Is it concessional loans? Is it debt? Is it, they have guarantees or equity. So once you feel that, you take it through an accredited entity. Accredited entities in Kenya are three. We have Kenya Commercial Bank, we have Acumen, which is a regional entity, and then we have NEMA. So those are accredited entities. Through the accredited entities and the NDA, now we facilitate that proposal, like we push it to the GCF. And then once it comes back, we also offer support in terms of reviewing it. And then once you receive the money, the bank will stop with the accredited entities because they have to report back to the Green Climate Fund on how you spend the money. So that's one. And then we have the Global Environment Facility. That is the Ministry of Environment is in charge of managing that fund. And then the Adaptation Fund, the accredited entity is NEMA. So those are three climate change-oriented avenues through which you can access funding. Recently, there was a program that was launched by the name Financing Locally Led Climate Action. Brian from the COG would have spoken more on that. But that's also another avenue through which the private sector can access financing. And for that one, what happens, they want to support the sub-national governments. So the support is county level based. The national government provides strategic oversight with regards to coordinating the county governments. And what they require from the sub-national government is to come up with innovative adaptation and mitigation-oriented proposals, and then they will be reviewed, and they will be financed through the national government. That's the easiest that can be accessed by you. So if you need to access that financing, of course you have to use the county governments. And then you come up with an innovative program or project, and then of course it will help the county government. It's an international thing. The other ones, they have websites and they have templates on how to prepare the concept note and proposals. The second question is with regards to the green bond. We have done a lot with regards to issuing our sovereign green bonds. It is necessary for the country to have the frameworks ready for that issuance. So the national government has come up with a Kenya Sovereign Green Bond Framework. That framework provides for the utilization of the proceeds that are going to come off the sovereign green bond. MACU, we've already had a corporate green bond that was issued in Kenya. It was cross-listed in the London Stock Exchange and also in the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And the proceeds that came off that went to supporting the building of, there's a university hostel along Jogoro that actually subscribes to the requirements of a climate-friendly sort of building. So the process that came of that went there, but the national government is yet to, of course, issue a sovereign one, but we have the structures in place right now. We've had the framework, and also we are working on a green taxonomy because it's needed so that we can attract international investors into investing in Kenya. Thank you.
Just to add on the green bond, it's something we have the framework as Safaricom. For the last 2-3 years, we've had the framework. Yesterday, we were discussing with our CEO, and I was telling him it is time now to issue a green bond. It will be oversubscribed. But we are still dancing around the issue. So one day, we will do that. Then from what I hear, in everything you said, I hear roadblock, bureaucracy, hard work. Because I'm listening to what you said, but I want to say this. There's a guy called Michael Koech in this room, and Michael Koech can tell you how Safaricom, so I'm addressing you to Michael. Michael, if you could just stand so that she can see you. So Michael put in concerted efforts to get money from the Global Environment Facility with NEMA, so he can share the pain of filling those forms and what have you, and then we didn't get the money. So it's a lesson learned. So Michael is here to help. Dr. Wandaka, do you want to talk about the cities, the green buildings, green building, and the current laws? Yeah.
Well, I may not talk much about that, but I know there's a session that is coming up with John.
Yes.
He has a session on green buildings.
Yes.
So I don't want to preempt around me because John is going to talk about that.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think with that we can, I know there could be a
He'd like to add something, but he just give him a moment.
Sorry, I just wanted to add two things.
Just one second, yeah.
Sorry, MC. Just wanted to appreciate Emily's comment, and we would be very delighted to develop a compendium, Emily, to see the bridge coming and meeting at one point. Right now, I feel that the bridge from investor side is going in a different direction, and the investee side is going in a different direction. So we would be very happy to collaborate in developing a fantastic compendium which could be user-friendly and which could be used by people to make it more effective. Second thing on the money, I know Treasury has spoken a lot about it. I don't want to go into those details, but there is another powerful idea that is being emerging, which is called co-creation. So anybody has a good idea, co-create with your potential donor, potential funder, potential grantee, grantor. There are so many grantors here who has some money to invest in a good project. So I would encourage all of you who has a good idea to kind of co-create with the investor directly. Thank you so much.
Just the final comment. I think in the next session, Treasury and the likes, please bring those people who've gotten the money so that they can tell us how they got the money. It is easier to show me than say it here. So in future, let's see any of the recipients of the JF, the CF, whatever, they be on this panel and say, this is what I did. Then the rest of us here, we walk in those footsteps. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask you to stand for a group photo, an official group photo for the team. You may press the mic. You may close in for a group photo.
I will stand near my right.
Then,
you find your own height.
An official group photo there, and then Chair Emily, I'll ask you to join.
Our session chair, please join.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so
I've
much.
learned a lot on this panel. Thank you.
Moderator, very effective moderator.
I was asking you questions, you're not ready.
I cannot be on a panel, she's moderating. Lucy from Junkie Beans, she does very good work in organic waste, turning waste into good use, and she'd like to gift our panelists with something. You can do a garden, a kitchen garden, you can do your flowers. So Lucy, kindly come and gift our panelists.
Thank you. So kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should take the photo of Junkie Ben's logo.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. No, I was asking the questions from what they say. You are holding them to account. During the photo, bring the photo. Okay. Are you confident? Yes. Yes, please. Yes. Go to the okay. Thank you so much.
Round of applause for our panelists.
I was asking you questions from
That was a good one. Thank you again. Thank you, Karen and your team. Yeah, thank you. We'll go straight to the next session. The next session has Ms. Linda Munyao, our President, Environment Institute of Kenya. I'll ask her to come to the front and call her panelists. Thank you. You may. A hand of applause for her.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. You can imagine me standing here after Karen. I have to be super smart and more creative. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Linda Munyao. I'm an environmental scientist. I am currently President of Environment Institute of Kenya, which is a professional association for environmental practitioners in our country. I'm very happy to have the session that's coming right ahead. And I'll just give a brief introduction on our topic for this time, which is COP27 priorities in the private sector lens. So in an effort to build on prior accomplishments and pave way for future ambition on climate action globally, the government of the Arab Republic of Egypt will host the 27th Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC, which is COP27, in November 2022 from 6th to 18th, that's next week. Governments agree that mobilizing stronger and more ambitious climate action is urgently required, and COP27 seeks renewed solidarity between countries to deliver on the landmark Paris Agreement for people and the planet. So action must come from governments, cities, regions, businesses, which is where we come in today, and investors. So engaging the private sector in climate change solutions is imperative because the sector can mobilize the financial and technical resources needed for climate actions, as well as innovate and develop solutions to alleviate the risks. That's if we can get the money. Yeah? I think that has been emphasized quite well today. So in line with the COP27 theme of delivering for people and the planet, this panel session will focus on COP27 priorities in private sector lenses. So in this panel, we have distinguished panelists from Africa Development Bank, Dr. Olofunso Osomori. Please welcome to the front. Let's give him a clap, please. So he's a Regional Principal Officer, Climate Change and Green Growth Program. He's a PhD holder, guys. So I want you to really push him and ask him all those questions that when we're done with the session, hopefully we'll be able to have an opportunity for that. Second, we have from FSD Kenya, which is the Financial Sector Deepening, Ms. Tamara Cook, who's the CEO. Welcome, let's give her a hand clap. And she's going to focus on the area of climate financing and just transition. Next, we have Mr. George Aluru, who's the KEPSA Energy and Extractives Chair. Let's give him a hand clap, please. And he's going to focus on the energy sector, just transition for the energy sector. Next, we have Engineer Sylvester Makaka from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and he's going to talk about net zero targets for manufacturing and industry. Is he here? Guys, remember, manufacturing sector is blamed a lot, sometimes unfairly, for climate change impact contribution. So let's hear what he's going to tell us today. We're looking forward to that. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to invite Ms. Lydia Kimani, a good friend of mine, who's an agricultural economist. And guys, listen to this, climate change negotiator. So welcome. So she's going to focus on the area of securing agriculture sector in the just transition. So thank you very much, our panel. You can see this is a very eminent group of people, and I hope we'll all have a good discussion today. So we'll jump right into it because Karen and her team have proceeded much in terms of time. So I think we'll just go straight, right? Are we ready, guys? Can we give them a clap? Because I think I've kind of made them feel a bit, but we're ready and excited. So we're going to start the first part, which is going to ask you to briefly highlight what your institution is doing with regard to sector contribution on climate change. So we'll start with you, Dr. Osomorin. Did I pronounce your name correct? Correct. Thank you, Dr. So you can tell us what is AFDB's contribution on Africa's just transition.
Thank you. Again, thank you again. It's good to be part of this conversation today. So you heard about the implementing entities for the Green Climate Fund, GCF. So beyond the national ones, there are also international implementing entities. It's a number of multilateral development banks who are very much pushing for skilled finance flows towards African countries, Kenya inclusive. And the bank is one of them. And given that I don't think there are other people from the World Bank and other MDBs here, so I think I can really praise the African Development Bank. We are perhaps the largest, financial institutions mobilizing capital to Africa. Actually, when it comes to adaptation of all the MDBs, AFDB is actually allocating more resources to adaptation compared to every other MDB, and that is very impressive. Because even our policy framework is very keen on implementing NDCs and ultimately also doing things differently on the ground. What is important is what we have done at the bank is, look, there's no such thing as climate finance as something that is existing in an institutional vacuum. It's not just money that is hanging in there that you're hoping that's going to drop on you. It's very much within our own framework of development. So what we've done at the AFDB is we don't have climate change projects. We have climate-informed projects, climate-informed development projects, or climate-proofing development projects. So basically, when we do roads or when we do agriculture, we do that with climate change in mind. So that's the lens through which we look at everything. So beyond GCF, it will interest you to know that the climate finance from the bank alone, in the last 5 years, it's more than what GCF has approved globally in the last 10 years. So you're looking at organizations who are constantly supporting actions on the ground through financing, through innovation, but also creating partnership. So beyond money, we are able to use our convening power to bring actors around the table and say, what will it take to finance this? If somebody says it's risk, then we say, how can we do risk sharing facility in order for you to be able to bring your resources in? So just in a nutshell, to look at that as this organization that is championing new ideas beyond the money, but also bringing in the partnership requirement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. for that. I think for the team that's seated here that's been asking about how do we access the money, it would be critical that you could maybe later catch up with Dr. to be able to give you heads up and support on that. So, Ms. Cook, what role does FSD Kenya play in securing climate financing and just transition?
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here. So for those of you who don't know, FSD Kenya is part of a sisterhood of financial sector deepening programs across the continent. There's 10 of us, including FSD Africa, who has been working in green finance as well and actually worked on the Green Bond Framework for Kenya that was referenced earlier. FSD Kenya has been working in green finance, calling it that for 3 years, but we've been working on green finance since our inception because it affects farmers. And we look at agricultural finance, and they're dealing with the impacts of climate change. So looking at things like weather-based index insurance. More recently, what we've been doing is really looking at the enabling environment, the policy framework, for example, so working with the regulators on how to analyze climate risks, helping financial service providers know how to report on those risks, and then looking more broadly at the policy framework for example, counties, and we heard a lot about counties. We've actually, in partnership with Nairobi Securities Exchange, just started an assessment of the potential for green bonds for counties, and would love to share more about that. I'd also just like to refer to a question that was asked earlier about green building. And in partnership with the Kenya Green Building Society, we launched the Jenga Green Library to give builders ideas of what the green building materials are available in Kenya and how to use those. So please do check that out if you're interested. And even just last week, as part of our annual lecture series, we had a lecture on sustainable finance that was delivered by Assistant Secretary General Sano Giambo, and dealt with a lot of the questions that we're talking about today. And maybe I'll talk a bit more about that later, but if you didn't check out that lecture, I encourage you to do so. Finally, I think what we're really keen on is really making sure that Kenya benefits from the climate finance that's out there, and so that's about making sure that our data infrastructure is in place to be able to fill in those forms we just heard about, and actually qualify and verify that we qualify, and then looking at the carbon trading markets and what the potential is for that, and for a lot of the innovators here in Kenya who could really benefit from that, and therefore then benefit farmers and others who especially need adaptation, but also mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cook. I think this past week there's been so much in the news about wildlife deaths, and also pastoralists suffering from loss of animals. And I heard you talk about insurance. Would you say that there's a lack of information about access to the kind of financing that you would offer to be able to safeguard the livelihoods of such communities in Kenya?
Most definitely, and just to be clear, we don't offer the finance, we support the financial sector to deliver on that. And there's been a long history of trying to have both weather-based index insurance for crops, but also for livestock. Unfortunately, that's not as widespread as it could be, and even when people have it, it doesn't always pay out. And so really trying to match the reality of what's happening on the ground and what the insurance pays out is a challenge. I think as we've been talking about, climate change is real, and the problem with insurance, is that it's supposed to cover the rare risks when they happen. But if all the livestock are dying every year, for example, trying to figure out the right financial tools for that is more complicated.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Aluru, what measures are being adopted by the energy sector in curbing emissions while securing just transition for SMEs and communities?
Thanks for the question, and also thank you for the invite. I think I'll first start off by just mentioning that energy in itself is an enabler. Nobody, all over the world, no one buys electricity just to have electricity. So it's more around lighting, movement from one place to the other, heating your water. These kind of services are the things that actually energy does for you. So in terms of also our country itself, if we look at our country, we consume about 70% of our energy in biomass actually. It's not electricity, it's not petroleum. But then we overly spend a lot of time on electricity, trying to push around what can be done on electricity, negating that where we will have the most impact is more or less actually bioenergy. And this actually is straight directly to the communities, because it's more around cooking. Basically it's cooking. And I know there's another panelist, I think I saw there's someone else also from the cooking sector, but let me just delve into it a bit. So as a sector for us, one of the things we have really tried to push the government to do is really look around our strategy for bioenergy. So So we've done a lot of work together with the government. Now there's a whole strategy under development with several key focuses around making bioenergy self-sustainable, while at the same time trying to shift people away from rudimentary methods of cooking to maybe a bit more improved bioenergy and perhaps even natural gas, and as a transition fuel to probably even in future cooking with electricity. So that's one of the key things. But in terms of going back to electricity, because I know everybody loves to talk about electricity, we as a country are doing quite well, I would say, in terms of using low carbon technologies. We have something like 80% installed in just renewable, which is geothermal, wind, solar, and hydro, and very little thermal. And actually, if you look at it from the point of view of the energy that we actually get out of the grid, then we are 90-something%, which is very good for any economy around the world. But now the challenge then as we transition is how do we ensure that we still grow our economy while basing it off renewable energy? And now that's where the work is. Because unfortunately, variable renewable energy varies, basically. Yeah? So it might be there at one time and it's gone at another time. And then for us to kind of continue developing this, because we have quite an abundant resource of it. We have I think something like 6 gigawatts in wind, we have 10 gigawatts in geothermal, we have, I don't know how many gigawatts in solar, it's huge. But we will never seize these opportunities that we are naturally blessed with if we do not invest in things like transmission, interconnection. It's the boring things that we need to do now as a country, as Kenya. We really need to put money in transmission lines, in interconnections with our neighbors. And actually it's good that the African Development Bank is here. I know the African Development Bank is doing a lot of work to interconnect Tanzania to Zambia, Tanzania to Mozambique, also Kenya, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania. And these are the things that really we need to do. And as the private sector, of course, we do put in a lot of our funds into these projects. We take the time to develop and go for those places where you say the money is and you don't know. we go there and we build relations with the banks, with all these financiers, with the aim that we also contribute to what overall as a country we are doing. Let me not dwell too much on electricity. So on the side of petroleum, as a country, we don't produce our own petroleum. Yes, we have some finds. They're not yet at a stage where you can say we are now using them. So in that sense, the transition on the petroleum side is around replacement. How do we move from petroleum-based transportation? Again, think about the services, not the energy itself, to other forms of transportation. You saw, I think all of us have seen a lot of movement in the country around mobility, the launching of electric buses. There's a whole effort via the industry, and even within our sector board, we have a dedicated subsector just for green energy to see how we can move from petroleum to e-fuels, from green hydrogen also to fertilizer, which again comes to agriculture. The same green hydrogen can go into a fuel cell that still powers transportation. So there's a lot of work to be done, and the new frontiers, as I see it from the energy side, are these things that help us, especially as Kenya, to kind of, I don't want to say leapfrog because everybody says leapfrog, but win ourselves from petroleum.
Say it.
We need to win ourselves from petroleum and find other ways to provide our communities with the services that they so desperately need, while not relying on what I would say is ancient technology in the thinking of a green transition. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. I can see the passion in that. Engineer Makaka, globally businesses are adopting net zero targets. So in Kenya, how are we doing in going towards that net zero? Although this morning we were told, we are contributing, 0.03 out of, percent. What are we doing, even though we are, emitting very little? What are we doing to work towards net zero?
Great question. and the conversation around net zero is very wide. But let me start off by saying that we as human beings, industrialization is driven by two factors. One is our need to change our livelihood and lifestyles, and the speed at which we want to change. And that informs how fast and how quick an industry is coming up, and this industry will need energy, will need resources, and need you as a consumer. So we can't really stop industrializing to go to net zero. We only need to come in with mechanisms on mitigation, on how to manufacture. So our drive as industry, and from an energy perspective, is to decouple the rate of growth of demand for consumables, demand for infrastructure, demand for housing, demand for services, demand for everything that we need today fast, and energy and emission contribution to this demand, so that we decouple the growth trajectory of the two, so that as much as we want to grow at 20% industrialization year on year, we want to reduce our rate of growth of emissions from the 20% as it were to something less, so that we can be achieving our targets on net zero. Then after we pollute at slow rate, what we want to do about it, then we go into the adaptations and how do we want to afforestate, how do we want to sink the carbon that is already emitted from our needs, and how we, so as KAM, we are looking at this year alone, we are targeting planting trees to the tune of 5 million, and those are targets that are achievable, and we are financing to support it. And the earlier panel actually talked about anybody who has benefited from the GEF funding. We were the pioneer beneficiaries of GEF funding, and this funding targeted energy efficiency across manufacturing and commercial sector. And we realized that there is a potential in Kenya today and in future with business as usual scenario to reduce energy efficiency to the tune of 35%. And that's a target that we are chasing every year to see how we can achieve that 35% reduction in our specific energy consumption. And so we went further to work with government and developed an energy efficiency and conservation strategy that is targeting to achieve 2.5% across the board on every energy consumption in Kenya at industry and commercial level. So we are moving this journey and trying to have what we call farm level interventions to look at what is the status now and how can we change it. There are so many programs that we are working on, including waste management, water and water resource efficiency management, and energy, of course, is a key area we are focusing. And then the transition. When we were having this conversation around fossil fuels, especially the cement industry and steel, and Kenya is coming into the League of Steel Manufacturers very soon, we thought of, will it be business as usual? Will we then rely on coal as a primary fuel source, or there are other alternatives? And I know friends from the hydrogen discussion group are maybe in the House, and we are looking at then how viable is our green hydrogen as an alternative to coal and other petrol fuels, so that with time we can transit from fossil fuels per se and go towards greener and cleaner fuels. We may not do it 100%, but all we want to achieve is a net zero, so that whatever emissions that come out in our need and speed industrialization program can be synced or mitigated by doing alternative and balancing that, reducing the growth rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer. Before you hand over the mic, so would you say that we are, as a country and as a Kenya industrial sector, would you say that we are then walking the talk, or are we, the way African countries are really trying to say, we need to develop, give us that chance. You have developed, you emitted, it's our chance now. Do you see, how do you balance between that need to develop and that desire to, not pollute as much? Do you see, are we adopting like cleaner methods of production compared to maybe what the West did in its time of massive revolution in the manufacturing sector?
You see, the market and the population, as it were, is constantly being responsive to cleaner products. I've seen in Europe some products are branded CO2 neutral. Some products are actually selling at a premium because of the level of CO2 footprint they have in the market and to the consumer. And the market is becoming very aware of this. And Africa cannot be left behind, and Kenya will not be left behind for sure. But it cannot be the stumbling block into Africa and Kenya's industrialization process. We cannot say we will not do anything just because the world wants cleaner products. We will walk this talk. And the way to walk this talk to industrialize is, first, we looked at Kenya's scenario, for instance. All the resources, the renewable resources that we have will take us up to how far? Geothermal will only give us up to 10,000 megawatts. Wind is still a slow process, and solar is still slow. So we need a mix of both. All we need to look into is how do we balance the greening and the development. We cannot stop development just because the world is pushing us to go green. We cannot push. That's why I said we must balance need and the speed. So we shall grow as manufacturing, we shall grow Africa as an industrialized continent. The rate of growth of polluting will not be at the same level China did it or the rest of the world did it. We shall do it because we have a mix of both. We have a mix of petroleum, we have a rich resource of renewables, so we must be allowed to have a mix of both so that our trajectory towards polluting is slower and we decouple the rate of our growth and the rate of our pollution. And that will be my take on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer. I hope you're on the panel that's representing Kenya in COP27. I like the way, you're really pushing that we do need to develop, we have to, it's our turn to grow, but we are also looking at managing and walking the talk. So, Lydia, so you know that agriculture has been seen or been recognized by the UNFCCC as having great potential for contributing in the climate sector debate and in actually undertaking actions to help the world and to help Africa specifically towards mitigating and adapting towards climate change. So my question to you, what are we doing as a country to secure the agriculture sector, even as we pursue just transition, given its critical role in food security and livelihoods, as well as being Kenya's biggest employer? What are we doing?
Okay. So thank you very much, Linda. From the agriculture sector, one of the things that in matters climate change, for the first time, agriculture is not coming in last. The National Treasury actually is on record saying that agriculture has been one of the most progressive sectors in the economy in terms of delivering on the climate action. So to this end, there has been there are sectoral policies. First of all, we have a strategy and implementation framework, and there's a model that has been developed that is a multi-stakeholder platform to deliver on climate change. So previous panel, there was a call, especially from FAO, that we need to have a multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approach. So we're already doing that in agriculture. And the beauty about this particular model is that we have it at the national level, and now it is cascading to all 47 counties. And the focus of this particular model is to ensure that, to begin with, we are able to cascade the national strategy so that all stakeholders in the agriculture sector, private sector, now county governments, and even the civil society are all aware of what climate action is being undertaken in the agriculture sector. We are looking at improving productivity, reducing emissions, because agriculture is one of the highest emitters from the food waste and food loss resulting in organic waste. and also building resilience of ecosystems and also of livelihoods. So once this is done, we establish the county multi-stakeholder platforms at the devolved level. These are going to be the platforms or the avenues that the agriculture sector will use to access the fund that Walter talked about, the financing locally led climate action. So the multi-stakeholder platform has been a very good innovation for the agriculture sector. We have seen it gain traction because we have already established 22 out of 47 county multi-stakeholder platforms. So from there then we are going to move into the sensitizing them in terms of what is our obligation to the commitments we have made in the NDC through our sectoral plan, that is a strategy, and then move into the next phase. So we are also looking at the multi-stakeholder platform as an avenue to sensitize the stakeholders on what the private sector has committed from what we have launched today. There has also been the challenge of awareness. So that is why we are looking at this multi-stakeholder model is an entry point in terms of we have created the policies, we have the NCAP, we have the sectoral policies, but who does the sensitization? So we start with sensitization. From there, we also create awareness in terms of the opportunities that are there, for example, the access to financing, and then we track. We have an adaptation tracking tool for the agriculture sector. Because the challenge is that agriculture is predominantly adaptation in terms of climate change. And what was said earlier, that even AFTB, that we need more adaptation financing. But adaptation has been a challenge because we have not quantified it. When we are asked how much is the cost of adaptation, mitigation is easy, and that is where you find that financing flows, even our NDC, we have focused on the adaptation, but finance is flowing to mitigation. So for the agriculture sector, we have an adaptation tool that is seeking to understand what are all the players contributing to climate action, so that when we ask for climate finance, we are able to understand what is the contribution of the private sector, how much is the county giving, how much has civil society, to what extent have we reduced emissions, to what extent have we built resilience, and what more can we do. So at least it is very commendable to see this. And again, we also are looking at the multi-stakeholder model to create traction in terms of the conversations in the COP, because we agree at the COP and then come back and implement and cascade. The UNFCCC has placed a premium on locally led climate action. So for us, we are using the multi-stakeholder platform to create awareness. As we develop our country positions, we are mobilizing around this, the multi-stakeholder platform and creating awareness that these are our priorities as a sector, and this is the way in which they will impact you. And once COP is over, we will use the multi-stakeholder platform again to say these are the decisions and this is how they affect you on your daily life. So that improves the communication and ultimately the investments, and also gaining traction in terms of climate action in the agriculture sector. Thank you.
I really like what you've said, and that you've involved, up to 22 counties so far. I'm wondering, some of the terms you've talked about and the references that you've made can tend to be quite technical, considering that agriculture in our country is mostly formal and undertaken by a majority of people who may not be so savvy in terms of climate change talk and adaptation, that kind of thing. How are we working as a private sector to rope in the rest of the community in our country, the day-to-day person that's down there on the ground? How is there a plan to have them, embraced and brought in to be able to partake in the conversation? Because without the majority being in, then we'd be really doing something small in our corner, but not making a big impact as fast as we could.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, that is something that has also been taken into consideration. Even with the tracking tool, there was proposals to have it translated so that we are able to capture the information as is. We appreciate, yes, indeed, that the conversation can be very technical. So we have a thematic working group in the multi-stakeholder platform that is dedicated on knowledge management. So this is what they will be looking at. How are we breaking down the information? How are we making it palatable to the different audiences, so that we also gain the momentum as a sector. So that is one thing.
Thank you very much. So we'll just shift gears a bit. I think we all have heard what each of the institutions is doing with regard to this topic for today. So we are now moving to COP27, which is coming up next week. and it's been touted as the African COP. So I'll start with you, Dr. Osomorin. What's your view on COP27 and measures to ensure double provision of adaptation commitment and financing for Africa's development and just transition?
Thank you. So COP27 has been called multiple names. Some call it the African COP, some say it's the Middle East COP in Africa, some say it's the implementation COP. Whatever it is, we all agree that it's happening. I want to be very brutally honest. Look, COPs are not negotiation events, they are marketplaces. And when I say that, I mean, look, the deals, the decisions, forget the whole negotiation room and the whole preparation of African group of negotiators. Most of the things are happening on the margins of COP. The events, and you always see that in the first few days of COP, you've got heavy presence of heads of state, presidents, and they're just there for 2-3 days. But from experience, just look at the kind of conversations that happen there. Because all the negotiators are having negotiations till the second week. But then you see the presidents of country coming from the first 3 days. Because that is the marketplace. That's what's happening. Many of you may be aware, last year, South Africa came with a game plan. So South Africa claims to be part of Africa, and they are. So they will be part of the African group of negotiators. They will have all of those African group of negotiator meetings, but then they knew what they wanted. They wanted a negotiated platform to be able to say, look, you want us to make just transition. We will make it. But this is our game plan. This is what we need. It's going to cost us $40 billion. And we want you to commit to pay for it. So to leave the coal, to leave everything, and it's going to take us by 2060. So there's a long-term view to it. And let me be honest with you, the long-term view also doesn't mean that in the shortest time you can't increase your emission. It's a long-term view, long-term horizon. They didn't get $40 billion, but they got commitment of $8.5 billion. Now, you're going to COP27, you're going to see the same with Egypt. You're going to see the same with Namibia. Namibia is building a program around green hydrogen, $9 billion for a country with 2.3 million people. What am I saying all of this? You know, Kenya, we must not be left behind. COP27 is perhaps gone. By COP28, nothing stops Kenya from having a Kenyan Day. It's a whole investment program where you spend a year to design what you want, the cost of you to make that transition. Because it's very important. It's important because that transition brings you in a space where you can achieve your objective, at the same time you can contribute to global objectives. So your national development priorities are first and foremost the most important. And in doing that, you also say, look, I can also be part of the global solution, but it's going to be a cost. And already within UNFCCC, there's a just transition declaration that was made last year at COP26, where we agree that developed countries, countries of the global north, are willing to make finance available. Why am I saying this? Look, this negotiation, these help us, we're vulnerable and all the like. We've done that for 26 COPs. It's not gotten us anywhere. Come to the place as a businessman and say, this is a marketplace, and one thing about market is you bring your product in there in exchange for another value. So it's a value for value kind of transaction. And if that can happen, you can be rest assured that the conversation we'll be having nationally will be, how do we, in South Africa now, it is about how do we spend our money? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's about, we got a pledge, as Norway paid in, is the US going to pay in? What do we need to do within the short 5 years? So when I say money is not necessarily scarce, I really mean it. But we're expecting money to fall on us. We're expecting money to be generous towards us. However, the language of money is business. And we must be able to package our approach as a country and go there to a marketplace. That first 3 days and that whole engagement, that is where the real things happen. We will continue to negotiate. We'll continue to support negotiators. We'll continue to prepare them. Look, AFDB for the past 12 years, actually almost 15 years, has been paying for all African group of negotiators. Just right now, this week, they are all gathered in Egypt and to say African position. We're not going to stop doing that. But the truth is this, the business is in the marketplace, and I hope we can take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very candid explanation. And I think, yeah, the thing here is the just in the transition. That yes, we have to transition, yes, to clean energy, but we have to be just. We are going to develop and we'll develop, and I think it's good that Africa is beginning to take those positions to be very brave, and I hope that here Kenya can start working towards COP28. Tamara, so climate financing should be adequate, predictable, I'm emphasizing some words, and implementation of adaptation measures, they should be adequate and predictable. What's your view on predictability of incentives and carbon market for business climate action?
In short, they are not. And I wanna build on what you said earlier about doing the boring things. I actually think that that's a little bit of what we need to do. If we're gonna have this COP28 day that you're talking about, we need to put together some of those boring things. So how do we put in place the infrastructure, the architecture for building not only the bankable projects, because we've got bankable projects in spades, but they aren't bankable projects that have filled out the forms correctly, that have all the data, that have the green service providers who are here who can verify everything. And so what we need to do is really look at how do we raise awareness about what the finance is and what the requirements are to do that. How do we enable the private sector to be able to prepare for those, to put forward their bankable projects in a way that is framed in a way that they will be approved and follow in your footsteps, as you shared with us, and how do we make sure that, last week Sanda said something in our lecture. She said there's a perception that there's not bankable projects out there, and I think that's not true. That what's true is what you were saying is that the projects aren't meeting, the supply and the demand aren't clearing, and so what can we do to put in place the infrastructure that's needed for the supply and demand to clear so that we can get to that just transition that you talk about. And so I feel sad that COP27 is already over, evidently. But I think today is the day to start thinking about COP28 and what is Kenya's offer to COP28 in a way that it will not just be a show, but it will be a deal room that results in real money ending up in the businesses of Kenyans and in the benefiting the people of Kenya, because we need it. The last thing I'll just say is that one of the risks of getting this infrastructure in place is actually it can leave out some people, and you talked about micro and small enterprises. When green finance rules and green finance risks and green finance disclosures are put out there, sometimes the micro and small enterprises aren't capable of meeting those. So we need to make sure that we do green finance, climate finance in a way that they are not excluded from the party, but are build their capacity so that they can actually enjoy the party. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I think the challenge remains that the formalized sector of business in Kenya is really able to go in and get things done, but the majority of our economy is informal, and that's the part that really needs to not be left behind. So that's a really good point. That,
just add one thing on that. I
yes.
think that there also could be potentially some aggregation models. So how can we bring together groups of micro and small enterprises so that they can qualify? Because they're never going to qualify for these really big deals on their own, but is there a way we can aggregate farming businesses, for example, to be able to qualify together?
Actually, in the 80s, Kenya was really strong on cooperatives, and very many small, farmer groups and other groups were able to, access financing and were able to grow. But that model has, faced quite a bit of challenges. But I note that the president has really started to talk more about cooperatives and small groups coming together to be able to have access to the various opportunities that are becoming more and more available. Mr. Aluru. So Africa is at crossroads between development and reduction of emissions, as we've already stated. Given the critical role of energy in just transition, what measures should we adopt to ensure that Africa does not lag behind in development while pursuing their transition pathway?
Thanks. And I think I'll also just build from the previous two.
Yes.
First, there's nothing like Africa. We should just get that out of our minds. Because South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, we are very different hypostases. We have to have our own unique bargaining position. Like South Africa goes to COP and thinks that they have 70-80% coal production of electricity based on coal. Kenya is going to COP27 with 80-90% production based on renewable energy. Those transitions are very different. We are like north and south, literally actually east and south. But the point being that, again, maybe I go back to my boring. As Kenya, we have this renewable resource we need to develop. For us to develop, we need to make the renewable resource a bit more stable, which means you either have to invest in coal, in natural gas, in other kind of base load production, including geothermal. But still, at the moment, most of this is expensive. And either that, or we also invest in transmission, which means that we interconnect with our neighbors. We are able to trade power. Whenever we have fluctuations let's say in our wind, we can get hydro from Ethiopia or from Uganda, or gas from Tanzania. And this is now where I think we as East Africans and maybe even as Kenyans, we must get ourselves in that first 3 days and say, yes, the world, you want us to do this, for us to achieve this, and then still have the same economic growth that you want to see. This is the amount of money that we need. African Development Bank is doing a great job with the transmission lines. Internally in Kenya itself, we need lines. Like Sylvester normally complains a lot about Mariakani substation because the coast of Kenya, there's issues with power. So those are the things we need, honestly. Yes, it might be very sexy and good to go and talk and say renewable energy and this and that, or more solar, more wind, but we will not do more solar, more wind unless we have the transmission, unless we work around demand growth. And these are things like green hydrogen help us with demand growth. We have to have interconnections, and we just need to value that into how many billions that will cost us, and go in those first 3 days and ask, you polluting countries, you have the money, you don't want us to go the same way as you guys, commit some funds for this. And again, the same thinking also has to go with our bioenergy. We must remember that this country, still 70% of us are just burning charcoal, firewood, both domestic and industry. So really, we need to do something about that, and we quantify it, go package it as a deal. I'm not really a big fan of the negotiations and all that. I'm more a fan of the deal side. So how much can Kenya actually walk out of this COP with? Okay, this COP is gone. Maybe COP 28. Let's package and say these are the things we need. And just like the South Africans, I was in Egypt about a month ago, and the Egyptians are actually going to come with the angle of we need to use a lot more of our natural gas to develop our economy. And they're using crazy amounts of natural resources.
Thank you very much. I can see the passion, and that's really good. Engineer, we were told today that there's lots of funding for adaptation, but we are not accessing it. So from energy sector, what adaptation measures are we putting in place?
Great. Thank you. I think the biggest challenge on adaptation is how to measure. And how to measure adaptation is still in the works on whether we are saying this adaptation worked and these are the results. So until that is sorted out, trying to package a project around adaptation will be a CSR project. So whether we will be approaching adaptation as a CSR, so that then CSR can get funding, is another discussion altogether. But let me say this for the sake of Kenya, Africa, as it were. George is saying there is no Africa. Africa is a consumer continent, and it's consuming from highly polluted economies. Highly polluted economies. if we were to go to the marketplace and say this is the time for Africa, and we shift a percentage of that polluted economy manufacturing portfolio into Africa, what are we talking about? And if that money to support this infrastructure, to support that level of manufacturing, take 5% from China, take 5% from Europe, take 5% from USA, take 5% from Asia, and dump it in Africa and say in the next 5 years we're going to have these industries. Let's take textile, for instance, all done in Africa, 5% of the global textile done in Africa. What is that infrastructure we need? So that then we are looking at greening manufacturing globally. So that if manufacturing is contributing 5% to the greenhouse gas emissions globally, what will it take to bring 1% of that and reduce it in Africa, because Africa is already green anyway? And how will that spur industrialization in Africa in whatever sector we want? Japan can give us something, and then we start negotiating at that level so that manufacturing shifts to Africa in the sense of greening environment, not in the sense of snatching jobs and building African economies, but in the sense of greening manufacturing globally. That, in my view, may work better, faster, and everybody should listen to that conversation. But in adaptation, Kenya, I think we are almost convinced that whatever emissions that will be generated from manufacturing, from agricultural, the first thing is to transit agricultural. As we go into mechanization, what sort of fuels are we using? Water is a necessity for manufacturing, and will water be sourced by solar, or will it be sourced by diesel engines? Will water be sourced, will plowing and land activities be driven by diesel tractors, or will it be driven by e-mobility vehicles? So there is a transition that needs to happen in the agricultural sector, and it's the largest contributor to this pollution in Kenya scenario. But we think that reforestation will restore the natural state of things as they were, and create a sink for the CO2 that then are emitted from manufacturing processes. So if we think in that line, first is to arrest the CO2. Then now we think of how do we help the communities, and that is a total value chain integration from the primary producer to the industry, because it is changing lifestyles. People, if you talk to a Maasai today, and all his cattle have perished because of the drought, it is, if you go tell him, I'll give you a tree to plant today, he'll spit on your face. But if you went to a Maasai land and said, I'm creating an ecosystem around agriculture and your farm animals, and did the oasis, solar-powered water system, so that they are assured of water. That's an adaptation, and at least they'll go through another 4-year season without having to suffer. If you went to Mandera and said, I'm creating an ecosystem around camel farming, you are more likely to receive a reception in Mandera than if you went there with food, a lorry full of food. And so adaptation can take very many names in very many communities. But I think the overarching thing is that we need to restore and create sinks for all the emissions that we are creating from manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. You can see there's a very serious askari next to me. So thank you very much, our panelists, for opening up and being really candid and frank, and just hitting the nail on the head. I don't know if we have time for a question from the plenary.
We can just take 2. We have 4 hands.
I think
that was the first one.
Yes.
So our good lady in red, may I borrow one of the mics? And then the second one was there. So I'll take 2 for the sake of time. Please, it's not easy to be a moderator.
Thank you very much. My name is Priscilla Karobi. I must apologize. My voice is not normally like this. I have a sore throat. I have a question for Ms. Cook. You have clearly and articulately stipulated that smallholder farmers need to be given insurance. You have touched a subject that is close to my heart, insurance. And you have said that FSD has been supporting insurance. So my question is, you are supporting weather index, and the lady earlier on, Karen, said, where is the money? Everybody here is talking about climate adaptation. And I agree entirely that there are many, and like engineer is saying, there are many names that you can bring to call the adaptation. I belong to the MSP, what do you call it? MSP, CSA MSP platform in the steering committee at the national level. And I want to ask FSD, where is the money for climate risk adaptation? Is there any? And well done to other panelists. I wish next time my voice would be okay. Thank you.
Please take note of the question, then we get one more from the gentleman, and it shall be balanced.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone and the organizers of this forum. My name is Teddy Obiero. I am the chairman Nyayo Estate in Bakassi. That's one of the largest real estate development, probably in the sub-Saharan Africa, 5,000 units, 30,000 residents roughly. Now, this question is actually to all of us, and it's a challenge to all of us. Financing businesses and everything. But as long as there's no community buy-in, all these things we're discussing here will probably not be implementable in some way. We've got businesses. An engineer represents the manufacturers. So the waste comes from them when you talk about climate change. And this is a challenge to anyone who is producing plastics and everything else. Have you implemented circularity within your company? Do you know where it goes, how it comes back? Because it affects the community. You rightly said it. Today, if you went to the pastoralist community with 3 seedlings, they'll probably chase you away. Soon we'll be having rains, torrential rains, floods everywhere. And this will be repeated again in another 5 years or 4 years. Same story. Nobody actively thinks and plans ahead. We can build smaller dams in every single county, in every single location, create the microclimate so that this does not have to repeat again. But we will be here 5 years, 10 years to discuss this very same thing because this has been discussed before. It's unfortunate. That's what it's
What is the question?
The question is this. When you talk about financing at business levels, we really need to think, and I really like, Tamara, what you said, we have to think about the SMEs and the community. Now, remove the SMEs because those are businesses, bring in the community. How do you create this awareness, scale it up? I'm giving you a challenge because we have done it at Nyayo. We've already collected about 5 tons of plastics in the last 2 years. How do we make sure now it is not just a Nyayo affair, and we make sure it's a Nairobi affair and the rest of the 46 counties? So the financing bit has to think community and has to think awareness at the level where it matters a lot. Thank you.
Quickly, there is not enough money. At least not in the ways that farmers need it. And so we have been working on this, we've been working with government. There is some limited subsidy that helps subsidize some of those policies. There's not enough, and there needs to be more. We need more innovation and sustainable models for insurance that takes into consideration climate change. I'll just give a very quick example. Last year we were working with some insurers who were trying to insure against the locust risk. Underwriters just wouldn't have it, right? They just wouldn't do it. And so we put up some kind of subsidized money just to say, look, this is an important risk. Farmers must be insured against it, even if your models tell you not to insure them. So find me after. I'm happy to keep talking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Go ahead.
Please, when we say there's not enough money, we're not saying there's not enough money in the global financial economy, globally as we speak. Our biggest challenge is distribution. How can we move money from where it is most abundant to where it is most needed? Because in the same country, in Kenya, the total capital flow within the SACCO alone is something within the range of $40 billion. Let's not talk about what is in the pension fund, the pension economy, and all the likes. So it's just that money is available, not evenly distributed. So then the innovation is how can we move it from where it is perhaps most abundant and less needed to where it is most needed and perhaps less abundant. I think that's the point. Thank you.
So I think we are pressed of time, and I know we have more answers, but the good thing is that we have lunch out here and we have more time to interact and answer questions. But I have been prevailed upon me to give half a minute to Irimo to say just one thing. I think there's a question, I guess. In less than a minute.
Thank you, MC, for the concession. I will really try to make it half a minute. Wairibo Jage, Vice Chair, Education Sector Board at KEPSA. As you proceed to Co-op 27, it would be interesting to know the number of jobs and opportunities tied to those deals. Because if we're linking it to that big, hairy, audacious goal to move manufacturing in Africa, I think there's need to work backwards and look at skills development right across TVETs and universities. So I'd like some comments around that. There's need for change at that level to create the skills and competencies around climate readiness. Any thoughts and reactions around that? One of the things the Education Sector Board learned through COVID is that Africa is on its own, and therefore we need African solutions for African problems, and universities should be the hub of research and development that can be commercialized. But we need the skills to do that. So your comments around that would be very helpful. And of course, thinking right down to the level of the young children in the classroom, everything that we do really needs to start at that level in terms of ensuring that we all appreciate climate change with this generation and the next. So what are your thoughts around creating readiness at that? It would be useful to collaborate to create that understanding at that level. One thought I had as you were talking, and see, I know I am exceeding my half a minute, the 37,000 classes that need to be built to facilitate the double transition next year of junior secondary students and the last cohort of 844. What an opportunity to build climate-ready classrooms and teach children what climate change is right from their environment. Finally, some thoughts there that Africa is a number of countries and we need to go independently, but what does that make about, what do we then make of Africa, what is it called, Agenda 2063, that encourages Africa to think as one. Thank you, MC.
Thank you. I'll ask the panelists to conclude that in 1 minute.
Okay, Lydia? I know negotiations has been frowned upon in this particular panel, but I'll take a shot. And one of the things that the private sector needs to be very strong on is the response measures. There's a stream of negotiations that looks at response measures. So part of the work of the Katowice Committee on response measures on implementation is looking at economic transition and diversification, the just transition. But besides that, they look at tools for assessing the impact of implementation. But we find that in Africa, we have not had that opportunity. So we are not able to know how much do we need. So while Daktari from FDB is saying it's a deal room, you need evidence. And that's why in economics we say, in God we trust, but everyone else must bring data. So we need to be very strong in the Katowice committee on implementation as the private sector, so that we can give impetus to having those tools to evaluate our adaptation needs. Then that way we'll be able to have, at the click of a button, now with the use of digital tools like analytics, we're able to have, at the click of a button, we know how many jobs do we need in agriculture, in energy, and what will it cost. Then when we go to the deal room, we have our facts and figures, and we're able to close deals very quickly. So private sector, I'm rallying you to be very active on response measures in the negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can just touch on the education and training bit. I would say that at Environment Institute of Kenya, we have the widest pool of environmental practitioners and academics, and we are able to partner with institutions to be able to deliver targeted training, and we're already rolling that out across the counties because our membership extends throughout the country. So I think those are opportunities that we can plug into, and it's what we were talking about, synergies, that we're all doing many things in different little corners but not working together. So thank you very much, our great team of panelists. Can we please give them a hand clap as they arrive for a photograph?
Yeah, thank you. You may stand for a good photo. You may place the items in the seat and take a photograph.
For this photo, we take the sector chair who is present in the room. Wairimu, join the team. So Wairimu Jag is the vice chair of the education sector board. At KEPSA, we value our sector leaders because they drive the agenda for our engagement. And I'm happy in this panel there's also George Anuru, the chair of the Energy and Extractive Sector Board. And Lucy has a gift pack for you. Lucy, Junkie Beans. Yes, once more.
As they do that, I will, now that a few of us have left the room, I'll be asking those who are at the far end, if you don't mind coming closer as we get ready for the last session. I'm asking those who are moderating, we need to, also stand and stretch a bit so that also we give the audience. Wait a minute. So if you don't mind moving a bit, then also standing and stretching so that we give the next session. The moderator and the panel will give them an easy listen. So please stand and stretch kindly. You may stand and stretch so that if you are going for lunch, I know sometimes the lesson near the lunch break is always the hardest, especially to concentrate. So, but please, if you don't mind, you may stand and stretch for a minute. And if you also don't mind coming through to other central region, you are welcome. I know people have a way of adapting to where they start first, so it's not easy to move you. Plus, maybe water is still there looking at you. So, well, if you're fine where you are, you may, but we would really please if you can come closer, so you don't have anything empty here. Have you stretched so that you can give them a good listen? Yeah. We don't want them to feel like they are not speaking to us. Thank you very much. If you have stretched, we are here for, we are requesting the, thank you. We may have our seats, and then please we wait for them to finish, then we all finish together. And we are requesting the next group that is moderated by Faith Jagi, to see if we can compress into about 30 minutes, please, so that we are able to, I know we stretched the time a bit because of, we also started a bit late, but we are asking the next group to help and compress their presentation in about half an hour. We may be seated and listen and welcome. Karibu sana.
Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
This is that session you've been waiting for. This is that very session. So, because we are doing live stream, I think it is good if we have tables filled so that it doesn't feel empty. I still call upon us on those extreme ends to come in nearer here. A very kind request. So the extreme ends, kindly come here in the middle so that you don't feel like you're talking to an empty room. I can see people are packing bags. But just give us 20 minutes of your time. These 20 minutes will never come back in eternity. But they're also very, very significant and important. Here is the moment to listen to action, because we've been listening to policies, frameworks, we've listened to all that. But this is a moment to just also practically hear from the Kenyan private sector what really is happening. What are these solutions that are there? And I like when Dr. Somorin says, money is there, the issue is distribution. How do we distribute it? And how does it come down? I'm so honored you have come. Thank you so much. I now feel like yes, I'm surrounded by the right people around me. Thank you very much. So this session is about the Climate Business Information Network that we just unveiled today. It's a network that is not just beginning, but it has been there for the last 2 years. I call it a network of resilience, because it is a network that started its life during the COVID period, when there was all the protocols that told us not to meet, all the protocols that had every single reason as to why we shouldn't have done what we have done today were in place. But this team of people braced all those challenges, and today they've come out victorious. One, they've come out with a strategy. Secondly, they've come up with a business case for investing in climate change. And lastly, they're going to showcase to you what really solutions they're offering. And going forward, the Climate Business Information Network will be very instrumental in the implementation of the strategy that we have just launched today. And one thing I like about this platform is that it has both multinationals, it has both SMEs, it has both corporates, it has both youth and women. So when I am in there, I normally find everything that sometimes doesn't work together actually being there together. And I'd like them just to share what has that platform meant for them, what value has it added, and maybe implore upon you to join them so that you can be able to make big this climate action. So allow me to invite the distinguished panelists with me, Susan Jerry, the President of the Commercial Aquaculture Society of Kenya. Give her a round of applause. This lady is Jerry, but she speaks about fish. She will tell you about the fish here in Kenya, the fish in East Africa. So we want to hear the issue of climate and fish and aquaculture as a whole. How does that apply? We see trees, we see animals. Do fish really get affected? I think that is what she will tell us. Then we have one wonderful person. I met this person the first time in Denmark, but he's a Kenyan. And I got the opportunity to visit his farm about 2 years ago, if I am not wrong, and I was just impressed by what he does. And he's really passionate about it. All the way from where? Mr. Samuel Rigo. If you're here, you will love the story of Samuel Rigo and the rice husks. He will tell you how he is turning the rice husks into organic fertilizer and what that means for our soil. We have a wonderful Lucy, who's been giving us gifts here. As we grapple with the challenge of organic waste, Lucy has found a way of ensuring that organic waste has a solution. Not in the rural area, but actually here in Nairobi. So she will tell us about her story and the BSF and what that means. And if you are keen enough, I think a week ago she was actually in the papers. She was declaring all her millions. I loved her transparency, because in business people don't declare We want the money, but we don't want to say if we have it or we do not have it. But Lucy is very transparent just to tell us, to give us hope that this sector that is sometimes seen hopeless, there is opportunity in it. Lydia, will you want to come back to the podium? I know today is Pressure Day, but in this time you are coming back as SOCA, Society of Crops Agribusiness Advisors, and the work that the platform is doing through developing climate smart agriculture. She will share with us that. I have somebody all the way from Kisumu. You see this panel is diverse, huh? It's not just Nairobi based. Bernard Odhiambo, all the way from Kisumu, he has just won an award on his sanitation solution. Oh, he's saying I say Kisumu City. Yes, he comes all the way from Kisumu City, and he will be sharing with us what is that he's doing there. I like his passion of, he shows me the sewerage water, and I don't know, it passes through water and some charcoal, and up there is clean water. His commitment is just on another level. I think he will share that with us. And lastly, we have Michael Koech. Michael was already mentioned in the floor. Michael works in the telecommunication sector. And what is it about climate change and the telecommunication sector? So you can see my panel is full, so I think I'm fine standing here. Maybe you can still listen to me. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is only but a few of the CBN members. We're about 50 entities that have been implementing, deliberately integrating climate orientation in their business models, and that is what I'd like them to share with us. We'll try our best not to stretch the 30 minutes, but I believe if we do 45, we'll still be fine. So starting with Susan, in a minute, what is the climate smart solution that you're offering to the fisheries sector? I can hear some noise with me around. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Faith. Let me start by saying that one of our objectives is to achieve sustainable food systems by encompassing the environment, social and economic aspects of artisanal fisheries and aquaculture. So for aquaculture, one of the things that we are doing is to make fish farming a simplified, understandable model, unlike what we all believe that fish must just be in the oceans. So we have raised ponds, which means even people within the cities can be able to rear fish. People within small areas can be able to rear fish. We are currently doing cages, both in the lake, and now we are starting in the marine. And aquaculture does just not mean freshwater. Aquaculture for marine is known as mariculture. So we also have integrated systems, food systems where we are able to grow vegetables using our wastewater. We are able to do integrated rice farming in our rice paddies where we can be able to put in fish. And also just greenhouse farming where with very small units we can be able to maximize
the built environment. And he's done it not just as a business, but also for the country as a whole. The Transport, Housing, and Urban Ministry find him a very valuable person in matters built environment. So, karibu sana John. So let's go to Samuel. I know I already said what solution you're offering, so in a minute.
Perfect. But in that same minute, let me just ask one question to the team here. How many of us have grown up in the farm? Just by the raise of hand. How many grew up in the farm? Okay. Now, when we were growing up, we used, you remember when it rains and that sweet smell of the soil, right? And sometimes we could eat that soil for one way or the other, right? Now, how many today can allow their children to eat the soil in their farm? How many? So, Safi Organics is here to remedy these soils, change these soils. We have used a lot of fertilizers, a lot of chemicals, making these soils very hazardous. And the big question is, why are we eating from the same soils that we cannot eat from? So, all these chemicals, they are coming to our bodies. So Safi Organics uses technology to decentralize and small-scale fertilizer production, making it possible for the first time to produce an organic fertilizer that helps heal the soil and prevent nutrient losses in the soil, increase water holding capacity, and restore microorganisms in the soil.
Wow, I love that. We've gone to the soil, This microphone is not very friendly to me today. Or it's me who's not very friendly to it, So we keep interchanging the one that works. So thank you so much, Samuel, because you raised the question of soil and in the climate change space. Because at times you just look at the blanket, the warm blanket in the air, and that the one you call greenhouse emission, global warming. But when you bring it to the soil, then it means indeed these things are around us. They're not very, very far away from us. Lucy, what inspired you to be in town, in the city, and doing waste management, if I may call it like that, but from a climate perspective?
Okay, first of all, I was born in town, and people like shying away from that, it's a fact. And I was born in town when we used to have city council collecting waste, and we found it very interesting. So as time went by, I realized Nairobi is very dirty. And I thought, why not start something about waste collection? Okay, garbage collection. And yes, that's how we started. Of course, many years later, that's how I got the inspiration to at least clean the city and take it back to where it was when I was growing up. I never used to eat soil. I was slayish kidogo, but I loved playing with it. Yes, my sister did, and she did it very well. She could go and lumber the soil properly, especially when it rains, just like he has said. Today, even our own children cannot do that. So because of that, I felt like we want the Nairobi that we had those many years back.
Thank you, Lucy. Inspired by how life was then. Sometimes you are told that if we just went back to the basics, maybe we would not be having these challenges. How do you go back to the basics and solve our issues? Lydia, agriculture is very important in the climate change discourse, in food security and in livelihoods. What is the Society of Crops Agribusiness Advisors doing to ensure that climate-smart approaches are adopted in the country?
Thank you very much, Faith. So SOCA provides extension and advisory services to farmers, and to facilitate climate action, SOCA has supported the setup of multi-stakeholder platforms at the county level because agriculture is devolved. So we are looking at leveraging these multi-stakeholder platforms as avenues for disseminating information, because one of the things that has affected the uptake of technologies, products, services has been the absence of information. So we are leveraging on the multi-stakeholder platform model to create awareness on climate change, the provisions that have been made thereof in the policies, and then again also raise awareness. We're also supporting work on soil remediation like what Samuel is doing, but our approach is from a policy perspective so that we can catalyze the uptake and the commercialization of regenerative agriculture products like what Samuel is offering. So we have started looking at do we have standards for organic fertilizer? Yes, we want to commercialize it, but do we have standards? There's also the organic waste management regulations. We have realized that there's quite a bit of opportunity, especially for the agriculture sector. So there's a soil monitoring policy that has identified Kenya to have very high levels of soil infertility. So initiatives like what Sam is doing and what others are doing in terms of developing biopesticides, biofertilizers, can serve to remediate our soils. So SOCA has also taken a very strong approach in terms of supporting policy processes to create avenues for commercialization of these kinds of products and also create awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Coming to Bernard on the issue of water, and they normally say that the next war will be fought on water. What can we do to still have water? It seems here but not here.
That's true. It's good to note that 40% of Kenyan population do not have access to clean drinking water, and around 29% of the total population, only 29% can access improved sanitation facilities. And every year, we lose approximately 19,000 people as a result of diarrhea. And most of these are children, around 17,000. We lose 17,000 children every year as a result of diarrhea. Overall, Kenya loses 27 billion annually in trying to, in terms of healthcare, in sanitation-related diseases. And I think something needs to be done because, as you said, the next war, we are already fighting it, the next war will be on water. And for that reason, we need to come up with innovative water recycling technologies which will ensure that we promote water reuse and also minimize on pollution of the already suffering water bodies.
When you put those statistics, it feels like, wow, indeed we need to do something because we seem to have a silent killer even in our water scarcity. Lastly, for this particular session is Michael. Oh, I have John still. Oh, John, I need to remember you a lot. So, Michael, the telecommunication sector, very key. Looks like all of us cannot live without it. What measures should be or are being adopted in this sector for either adaptation or mitigation to climate-related issues?
I think for our sector, we've also been greatly impacted by climate change, of course. And of course, we have to offer, we have to protect ourselves and we have to offer solutions to others as well. So on the mitigation bit, and I think it has been talked about a lot in the morning, first is to know what your carbon footprint is, how much is your contribution, in the sector. So we've been able to do that a lot, just to calculate where we are. And then secondly, look at now, within our business, which areas do we need to take action so that we get the greatest impact and the buildings. It's nice to sit is to ensure that we invest a lot in energy efficient technologies within our network, and also more. Kenya is a fantastic example. All you need is to ensure that you connect yourself to the national grid, and you're almost there. But we have other serious markets who are still relying a lot on, diesel, coal, and all sorts of stuff. So that's where we invest a lot in terms of greening. For adaptation, of course, it has been mentioned, we need to do a lot of climate risk assessment, look at what can go wrong. If we have, for example, flooding, if we have droughts, as we experience today, rising sea levels. Some of our markets are in islands. We have Seychelles, we have Madagascar. So we also do sort of a range of climate risk assessment, look at where we need to do interventions. And of course now, how do we support our customer base? How do we support the citizens in those countries to adapt to some of those things?
Thank you so much, Michael. Quite an insight there about both mitigation and adaptation approaches. So which brings me to John on the built environment. Maybe you will tell us what is built environment and what are the climate opportunities within the built environment that you ought to be aware of.
Thank you, Faith. But first and foremost, whoever hired you to ignore me, go back and tell them that it was a tough sell. Now, back to the actual story. So I'm John Kabwir. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Basic Group Limited, which is a professional services consultancy offering solutions within the built environment space, especially to transform it towards sustainability. So the first question was, what exactly is the built environment? So built environment is anything that is not natural. Basically, all the built form that you see around, which at times comprises of cities, individual buildings, even landscapes, because landscapes are just designed by people and then have them as part of the built environment. So I always like to say that the built environment is a big and powerful economic tool, if well exploited, can be one of the biggest economic drivers, especially green building and sustainable infrastructure. Maybe just to kick off very quickly, just look at some of the pronouncements which have been made by the incoming government. They would like to build 200,000 houses a year. 200,000 houses a year means numerous jobs, means that we also have an opportunity to see that we save energy as much as possible so that we don't build them as business as usual. You can imagine, for example, I just did some very quick statistics right now where every household annually uses 208 kilowatt hours. So 200,000, that's 41,600 megawatts of hours. But when you build green, you can be able to save as much as 30% of these megawatt hours. So ask yourself, how many megawatts do our power installations provide? For example, when you say the Stevens Forks Dam, the renewable energy. So now that is the amount of investment that can be saved if we build properly and then channel all those funds towards other economic development activities like drought prevention. And that's why I say it can be a very powerful tool. Number two, it offers opportunities for most of these innovations that you hear around the green, the green innovations. Green innovations. The built environment is the biggest consumer of all these innovations. For example, talk about paving blocks built from recycled plastics. For these 200,000 houses, how many can we be able to use? And that's why when you talk about climate business, you cannot avoid the built environment because it consumes and consumes and consumes and demands for more. And that's why also on the flip side, we have to be very careful with it because in its huge consumption, it can also be destructive. Destructive to the biodiversity and also destructive to the climate. And that's why as recently as last year in 2021, UNEP released a report that the built environment, that's infrastructure and the buildings, use like about 70% of all the emissions. Just imagine the coal, other non-clean energy that we use, and also the buildings which demand more of this energy. So if we build right and we build green, it means we use less of these resources and we make sure that can be able to build in the resilience that we need. And also the built environment has taken a few steps forward right now, and we're making sure that all the developments which are coming up do what we call climate resilience assessments, because the built environment can come into a space and it can affect a particular area and it can also be affected by that particular area where it goes. And that's why we are very careful looking at very key indicators that make sure that we are green. And that way we normally use green building frameworks which can be able to give us proper measure and predictability in terms of climate resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just listening to you speaking, I wonder where you go to a proficiency to speak about climate change with such ease. I say so because it's not easy to find let me call a local business person speaking and saying, this is climate resilience, this is adaptation, this is risk assessment. So where did you get all these skills? And in particular, I'm asking because we have undergone several trainings at the Climate Business Information Network for the last 2 years. We have panel beat our vocabulary, aligning what is climate science and business. And as I sit here, honestly, I'm so refreshed about how you're able to articulate these matters in your various sectors and being able to speak it right and correct, Joanna, as you say. So what particular skills or lessons did you get from the trainings in the Climate Business Information Network that has helped you grow in your business? We can start with John now, so that whoever hired me is happy with me.
Thank you. So I can speak about my accreditations, but for this particular one, I'd like to talk about the training that we went through the Climate Business Information Network. And it really spoke to the business case of why we invest in climate business. And it taught us how to define a problem. And by being taught how to define a problem, you start to look at all the indicators, because you look at a problem holistically. You look at how you can be able to solve it and how it can be able to solve somebody else's problem. So when you apply that holistic approach, you start to get more and more knowledge around climate change, and you also start to develop a business sense as well as a climate-related business sense, let me just say that, so that you can be able to come up with good ideas and solutions which can be able to address both your business and also address environmental biodiversity issues as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I know it was never easy to start a problem from a climate perspective. That has been the biggest challenge even when you're doing when you're doing a GCF project. The very first thing is to ask you, it's a problem, but state it from a climate perspective. We used to do it from the normal developmental perspectives, but through the training, I think, as John says, we've managed to really see the problem from a climate perspective, see the problem from a planet perspective, profit perspective, and a people perspective. So I will just not go through everyone. I'll just pick one or two, especially the ones who've been in the training, to give us your specific learnings that you took from our learnings in adapted value chain, built environment, ecosystems, because all those trainings we've gone through. Michael, which particular training stood out for you?
Yeah, thank you, Faith. I think for me, first of all, it was fantastic hearing these kind of stories, and you can imagine for the whole of that time, listening from fish to buildings to agriculture. And so the point for me was, from a technology organization perspective, what then can be our contribution? And I think that's where that's where I see the real opportunity is. One is, of course, you talk to us a lot about the result areas, which is on mitigation and adaptation. So, of course, mitigation, that's where the money is, and there's a lot happening there. I think for us, it may not be really, I mean, it will go without saying. But in terms of adaptation, one, what do we need? How do we influence on agriculture? And I think as a telecommunication company, there have been a lot of reports around how do we help communities to adapt. First, on agriculture, there is the early warning systems. So how do we help to build that capacity to have early warning systems on weather, so that we can get that information to farmers. And then above that, also get the information on what then do they need to do, at that local level. So that's where I see a huge opportunity in terms of going forward. Let's use the infrastructure that we have. All these masts that are distributed all over. Can we have some sensor technology? Can we have some analysis that happens, and then send that information, and also move with accompany the same with what you need to do as a farmer, as in fisheries, in buildings. The other one is on climate financing. We've been told there's a lot of money, but it's also very difficult to get that money, into the grassroots. We have so many women in the rural areas who could be benefiting, but they don't have bank accounts. So how do we use mobile technology to ensure that those women actually receive, the funding down there, at the rural areas?
Okay, thank you. Speaking of climate finance, I want to bring in Lydia. And I like your expression, of course. But I'd like you to share what has been your greatest learning about climate finance. This climate finance and this space. What is that shocked you, that brought some reality awareness, by the way? Yes.
So thank you, Faith. For me, climate finance, when you listen to the conversations, especially now at the COP, you'll hear about means of implementation. We have capacity development, technology transfer, and then finance. So for me, my light bulb moment was realizing that climate finance is usually used to help communities access technology and build capacity. In addition, in terms of accessing climate finance, the other greatest takeaway was learning how to do GCF, public-private partnership concepts. And this is very interesting because in a developing country context, we have the government being the beholder of the resources, but the private sector capacities are normally very underdeveloped. Like what was said, that we have very large informal economies. So if we are going to build resilience and still develop, then we cannot run away from public-private partnerships. So for me, that was a very great competency built, so that going forward, I'm not just able to develop GCF concept notes, but that have public-private partnerships, increasing access to finance, especially for the agriculture sector where we really need it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, at least demonstrating really there was a lesson called GCF and concept note writing, and Susan is nodding. Susan, why are you hanging out with these young guys in these difficult matters?
Yeah, because number one, we were very honored for Team Samaki. I had 3 young people who had never interacted, not only at their local level, at county level, but now they were at national level, writing a concept paper. So I have journeyed with the 3 as part of the guys that I mentored, and one other, a more mature person. But it just gave them a platform in the various things that they did to understand how all this come together, the forests, the trees, how built environment comes in, the ecosystems. And this conversation was really interesting because, again, immediately after people go back and disseminate the same information. 2 weeks ago, fish were dying in Kisumu, and everybody said it's in Merogo. But you know what? It was climate change. It is the warming, the rising temperatures. So what basically happens there, you are sugar. So what basically happens is that as the temperatures rise, then the algae blooms increase, then the oxygen goes down, and it kills the fish. So, just now it was so easy to give that back to the farmers and say, hello, this is what you need to do. This is what's happening. It's making sense. For me, I think this whole process has been to break down the jargon. These very scientific, very difficult words of Dr. Njoroge. Finally, they were minced to a point that that farmer, that small actor, was able to now understand and be able to internalize and own the process. For me, I think that was the biggest win. Thank you.
Quite inspiring to hear that now we can talk climate change in our own local language. Sugar, yes, we can see you. And the sugar story. It's been quite interesting just to listen to the diversity of the country, the issues you're facing, how we package them, and how we find solutions for the country. And I can for sure tell you these guys seated here have developed 6 concept notes. 3 GCF, 3 public-private partnerships for climate change. So they have a story, and that's why we're presenting them before you, just to tell you that it is possible. From the biggest multinationals, the Airtels of this world, to Jackie Beans in growing. And I still have young people who've not come here today. I have Discover Brands, very young people growing within the system. And they've won very many awards within those 2 years because they've managed to understand themselves, package themselves within the climate change space. So lastly is partnerships. Rigo, all the way from where? Where did you meet with Samaki Smart Kisumu? There's Banana from Kisii. It was quite a journey to just interact with all these guys. What value has that added to your work in Mwea?
Right, just to add to what my dear friend here was saying, one of the reasons why algae are blooming is because of the nitrates, or nitrates from nitrogenous fertilizers. So when they get their way to the water, algae will always bloom. However, in terms of partnerships, for us at Safi Organics specifically, we have, today I had a conversation, a question for someone who told me, I'm a great tree planter. So I asked them, what kind of fertilizers do you use to plant those trees? DAP. Now, the question is, in the fertilizer industry, is contributing about 1.6% of the global greenhouse gases. So, yes, you are mitigating, but at the same time, you are encouraging. So, at the end of the day, I've had a chance to build actually two partners, or to build two partnerships that for people who are planting trees, and they're using our fertilizers now. And the best thing that we have seen with them, the maturity index, or the maturity time, has actually is shorter compared to when they were using DAP. Why? Because our fertilizer is storing water, and this tree needs this water as it grows. So partnerships have been a key element for Safi Organics, and I can say it has attributed to about 10% of the sales revenues growth.
Wonderful to hear. What I like is that they put statistics to their words. You have no idea how I'm encouraged I am. Daktari, it feels nice, just to hear statistics flowing back. It's very, very encouraging. Lucy, how has this partnership benefited you with being in CBIN? What value has this added to your business?
CBIN is Climate Business Information Network. Get the two words, information network. Because initially we were garbage collectors, but after joining CBIN, we have graduated to waste management company. And why I say that is because, yes, we were trying to do recycling in our own small ways, but after joining CBIN, we've learned that we can do something called a material recovery facility, where we collect our waste, we sort it, we segregate it, we put our plastic separately, carton separately, and of course our baby is the organic waste, which we recycle to poultry, feed, fish, and pig, and then of course our residue, which is what I was giving to the panelists, the organic fertilizer, which, like he says, ni fertilizer imeomoka. Let me use our local language. It's in a DAP and CGC, whatever, that is something else I won't mention, but our organic fertilizer, the fertilizer imeomoka. That is all information that we have upgraded by being members of CBIN Kenya.
It has been great, and through CBIN Kenya we have been able to learn a lot of things. And number one, we have been able to, we realized that through it that climate change was real, and something needed to be done urgently. And we have come up with some serious innovations. Number one, we are currently using baby diapers to grow trees. So when you buy our tree, it's like you hit two birds with one stone. We have also come up with a plastic toilet made using recycled plastic waste. And instead of using concrete and mortar, we came up with, we use crushed glass bottles to make it carbon free. And the toilet has the capacity of recycling your waste, human waste, into manure, so you can directly harvest your manure. It's an hydraulic system that when it gets filled, it comes out automatically, so you don't have to empty. It flows out into a container, then you can use it in your farm. We use water hyacinth, which is also a menace in the lake, to add value to that manure. So before you start using that toilet, we crush, we give you crushed water hyacinth. Water hyacinth is 80% water, so it comes out as something slurry. We put in the toilet, and it has a lot of phosphates because it lives in the lake where we have, which has been highly polluted with a lot of phosphates, so it sucks a lot of phosphates. So we do value addition to human waste that you can use to grow food. So apart from improving sanitation and combating climate change in terms of plastic waste, we are also providing a food security option for people living within the low-income areas. And the toilet is also very cheap and affordable, which can be, it's cost-effective, can be afforded by people who live within the low-income areas. And our business model is that you can give us 5,000, we give you the toilet, then you can pay us 500 per month, but you can also pay back in terms of plastic waste. If you collect plastic waste and at the end of the month you give us plastic, then we see the value of the plastic and what you are supposed to pay us, and that is how we are trying to combat plastic menace and plastic that gets into the lake within the low-income areas of Kisumu County.
I like Bernard how he speaks his technical terms in everyday language and like these things. We also got opportunity to actually go to Konza City to see some of these things. This group visited there and the elaborate recycling system, and to see Bernard doing that in Benjamin, doing that in Kisumu is really, really very encouraging. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a long story to give. This is only but a portion of what CPIN is. The rest are seated around here. We have Sugar, we have Michael, Arum, stand up Michael. There's no way you can all the way from the class to this launch at the Suku. Yes, so Michael has a special story on sugar. He really would love to pursue carbon offsetting in the sugar industry. So if there's anybody here who understands matters carbon in the sugar industry, Michael is here. He will tell you his needs, and he can be able to see how to partner with him. The rest are also here and there, and they've been doing great work. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your story. Indeed, you demonstrate that numerous opportunities exist to reduce our reliance on rain-fed agriculture, ensure food security, use renewable energy, recycle wastewater, and also reduce emissions in our processes. Further green investments for reducing our carbon footprint in energy, water, agriculture, among others, will enhance our resilience and sustainable livelihoods. And as I always say, it makes our life good. Who doesn't want to live good? It's all about living good. So, yeah, we must live well and live good. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. And we'll continue engaging with you. Please engage with them. They have a lot to share. And above all, come and join us. Yeah, come and join us. Come and join us. We will make the difference. Thank you so much. We need to take a group photo, I think. I don't know, Lucy, if still she has a magic around. Who's chair? Who's our go home? Our Ijaji gift pack. So can they take a photo with Dr. Somarin, I think, and Tamara? I can see a hand up. As long as you tell me you are allowing me to take your lunch. I'm not the one who is standing between you and lunch. Let's see that. So let's take this photo. I've seen your hand. I'll honor it. Linda, do you want to join these guys? I'm just looking for the sector leader is here. I think you the most nearest. Oh, me. Oh.
Oh, I forgot I'm part of them. Where can I start? Okay. Paparazzi.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to make a very short comment, and then my colleague from the academia will ask the question. The thing is this. I am negotiating for Action for Climate Empowerment. And today I'm very happy because that's what we've been doing. Action for Climate Empowerment is called ACE. It's about education, training, public awareness, public access to information, public participation, and international cooperation. Only one comment, good job. Where are you putting this information? How are you putting this information? And where is it? We will make it part of the NDCs. So just a short question from Cecilia.
Thank you, and a great panel, and for putting it on the CBINK agenda, the issue of biodiversity. As you know, KEPSA started the Natural Resource Forum, and we've heard about the agriculture today, we've heard about industry, mitigation, energy. We need to figure out what networks exist for biodiversity, especially in a country that has a wildlife economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for those interventions. Caroline, indeed we are looking for partnerships to help us package our stories, not just our stories but our interventions, and also link them to the NDC. So you come in as a timely partner, we thank you for offering to do that for us. The biodiversity discussion, we still operate within the KEPSA framework, so we are under the Environmental and Natural Resources Sector Board. The sector board has a subsector on biodiversity and ecosystems, led by Dr. Wandaka, seated here on the farthest end. So you can have a discussion on him, speaking a lot about private sector and landscape restoration and all that. So he'll be a good person to link up with. But above all, Cecilia, we worked closely with Mary for NAREF. And we agreed, while we deal with the business matters where we break things into money, Mary can help us complement the next partner to complement what it is that you are providing. So let's forge that partnership closely so that we can be able to provide holistic decisions. With that, we come to the end of the private sector launch of the private sector strategy on climate change solutions. And as we have demonstrated, it is not just a strategy, but indeed there are actions that have been going on or that need to be packaged going forward in the best way possible. So on behalf of the convening partners and the implementing partners of the GCF NAPRED Business Support Project, that is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, the National Treasury and Planning, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and all special guests that joined us today, let me take this opportunity to thank you all for gracing this forum. We have deliberated on key resolutions that will guide our commitment to climate action, together as we deliver for events such as floods and droughts that affect multiple sectors. Nonetheless, there exists a business case for investing in climate action. That though climate change presents an environmental, humanitarian, and economic crisis, there's still an opportunity to tap into the opportunities to mitigate our emissions as well as adapt and build resilience. The launch of the private sector strategy on climate change today marks a very significant milestone for business action in Kenya. Going forward, it means that the private sector has presented its commitment towards enhancing climate change adaptation and mitigation through investment, awareness creation, and directed resources to combat climate change for business sustainability. Further, it identifies actions that the private sector will take between the year 2022 and 2030 in contributing to the achievement of the government's climate change target 7. We as African businesses should be able to bring together a dialogue on some of the most pressing issues, opportunities for climate action, just transition, as well as the issues that affect the continent.
all the fruitful